Chuck Norris once said it without hesitation, without a smile, without doubt in his voice. I'd knock Bruce Lee out in the first round. It wasn't said for cameras. It wasn't said for hype. It was said in a room full of fighters, men who knew the difference between talk and truth. The room went quiet. Not the awkward kind of quiet. The heavy kind. The kind where everyone suddenly stops breathing at the same time. Because Bruce Lee was standing right there. Bruce didn't react the way people expected. He didn't scoff. Didn't smirk. Didn't defend his reputation. He didn't need to. Bruce Lee simply turned his head, met Chuck's eyes, and spoke in a calm, even tone that somehow carried more weight than shouting ever could. You won't land a single punch. No anger. No challenge. Just certainty. A few people laughed nervously. Others exchanged looks, unsure whether they'd just witnessed confidence or insanity. Chuck Norris was undefeated. A tournament machine. A powerhouse known for brutal knockouts and relentless pressure. Bruce Lee. Smaller. Lighter. Barely looked like a threat to men who measured strength in muscle and trophies. But Bruce wasn't measuring the same things. The tension thickened as Chuck stepped forward, rolling his shoulders, confidence still intact. You're fast, he said, almost amused. But speed doesn't stop fists. Bruce nodded slowly. Speed doesn't, he replied. Timing does. That single sentence changed the air in the room. Because Bruce Lee wasn't talking about fighting. He was talking about understanding. Understanding distance. Understanding rhythm. Understanding when not to be where danger is headed. No referee stepped in. No one tried to calm things down. Everyone knew, whatever happened next would be remembered. Chuck raised his guard. Bruce relaxed his stance. Two men. Two philosophies. Power versus perception. And when the moment came, when Chuck finally committed and unleashed everything he had, he threw punch after punch. Fast. Hard. Relentless. 47 strikes cut through the air. And Bruce Lee, he stood untouched. Not once did a fist meet flesh. Not once did Bruce need to block. That was the moment everyone realized. This wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a lesson. This wasn't a movie set. There were no lights hanging from the ceiling. No director shouting instructions. No second takes. This was real. A private martial arts gathering in the late 1960s, the kind most people never hear about. No cameras. No reporters. No headlines waiting to be written. Just fighters. Men who had spent their lives testing limits, breaking habits, and proving themselves in silence. Men who didn't need applause to know who they were. The room itself was simple. Plain mats on the floor. A few benches along the walls. The air smelled faintly of sweat and leather. Chuck Norris stood near the center. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Confident in a way only undefeated men can be. At that point in time, Chuck Norris was a force. Tournament after tournament had fallen in his favor. Opponents came prepared, and left humbled. His style was direct, powerful, unforgiving. People didn't just respect Chuck, they feared stepping in front of him. Bruce Lee stood off to the side. No dramatic entrance. No show of dominance. Just a quiet presence that somehow drew attention without asking for it. He didn't bounce on his feet. Didn't shadowbox. Didn't stretch to show flexibility. He watched. Every movement. Every breath. Every shift of weight from foot to foot. Bruce wasn't studying Chuck's muscles. He was studying his habits. Chuck noticed him watching and smirked. You're fast, Chuck said casually, arms crossed. I'll give you that. Bruce didn't respond right away. But speed, Chuck continued, is nothing without power. A few men nodded. They'd built entire careers on that belief. Bruce finally looked up and smiled. Not mocking, not dismissive. Just calm. Power, Bruce replied softly, is nothing without timing. That answer landed heavier than a punch. The room changed. Some people frowned, unsure what to make of it. Others leaned in, sensing something important was unfolding. Because Bruce Lee wasn't talking about strength. He was talking about understanding. Understanding distance. Understanding rhythm. Understanding when an opponent is committed, and when they are vulnerable. Chuck stepped closer, curiosity mixing with confidence. "You really think you can avoid everything?" he asked. Bruce tilted his head slightly. "I don't need to avoid everything," he said. "Only what matters." Silence followed. Not because people were impressed, but because they didn't quite understand him yet. Bruce Lee wasn't built like the men around him. He didn't look intimidating standing still. But there was something unsettling about how relaxed he remained. His shoulders were loose. His breathing slow. His eyes alert but calm. Chuck, on the other hand, looked ready. Hands high. Stance solid. Energy coiled like a spring. Two philosophies stood in the same room. One believed in force. The other believed in flow. And everyone there knew, whatever happened next would reveal which one truly ruled. Backhand index pointing down. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. Thumbs up like this video if you respect real martial artists, not loud talkers. Because what came next wasn't about winning. It was about redefining what strength really meant. They stepped onto the mat. No referee stood between them. No bell waited to be rung. No rulebook lay open on a table. This wasn't a match. It was a moment. A quiet agreement between two warriors who understood that some truths can't be explained, only demonstrated. The room tightened around them. Men who had been talking moments earlier now fell silent, instinctively backing away to give space. No one wanted to be too close. No one wanted to miss what was about to happen. Chuck Norris rolled his shoulders and began bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. Loose. Confident. Prepared. His fists came up naturally, elbows tucked in, stance solid and familiar. This was the posture of a man who had stood across from dozens of opponents and walked away undefeated. Bruce Lee did the opposite. He didn't raise his guard. He didn't shift into a traditional stance. His hands rested low, almost casually at his sides. To an untrained eye, it looked careless. To a trained one, it looked dangerous. Bruce's posture wasn't rigid, it was alive. Every muscle relaxed but ready. Every movement small, efficient, intentional. His eyes never left Chuck. Not staring. Observing. Chuck noticed immediately. "You sure you don't want to put your hands up?" he asked, half challenging, half amused. Bruce didn't bite. He took a slow breath in through his nose, then exhaled just as calmly. "Hands don't stop punches," Bruce said. "Position does." That answer unsettled more than a few people watching. Because Bruce wasn't preparing to block. He was preparing to not be there. Chuck circled left. Bruce adjusted without moving his feet. Chuck circled right. Bruce's shoulders turned just enough to stay aligned. Every time Chuck shifted, Bruce matched him, not reacting, but predicting. The mat felt smaller now. Chuck stopped bouncing. "You ready?" he asked again, this time more serious. Bruce nodded once. "I already am." That was the moment the air changed. Chuck stepped in suddenly, testing distance with a sharp feint. Bruce didn't flinch. Another feint. Still nothing. Chuck frowned slightly. Most fighters reacted. Bruce remained unreadable. Then Chuck committed. He launched forward with a fast jab, clean, direct, textbook perfect. It sliced through empty space. Bruce's head tilted just enough for the punch to miss by inches. Chuck followed with a cross. Miss. A hook came next, powerful enough to rattle bone. Bruce stepped inside it, the punch sliding past his shoulder. The room reacted with sharp breaths. Chuck didn't stop. Combination after combination poured out, practiced, explosive, relentless. Each strike was thrown with intent, with force, with the confidence of a man who expected contact. But Bruce Lee was never where the punches landed. He didn't retreat wildly. He didn't hop backward. He shifted. A fraction of an inch here. A half step there. A subtle turn of the hips. Every movement wasted nothing. Chuck increased speed. Punches came faster now. Harder. The sound of fists cutting through air echoed across the room. But there was no sound of impact. No thud. No crack. No gasp of pain. Bruce's expression never changed. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't strained. He was calm, almost bored. That's when the realization began to creep in. Chuck wasn't being blocked. He was being outpaced. Not in speed, but in awareness. Bruce Lee wasn't reacting to punches. He was reacting to intention. And the moment Chuck understood that, he knew this wasn't a challenge anymore. It was a lesson unfolding in real time. Chuck attacked first. Not recklessly. Not emotionally. Professionally. A sharp jab shot forward, fast and straight, aimed square at Bruce Lee's face. Bruce leaned back. Just enough. Miss. Before the room could register it, Chuck fired across, turning his hips and shoulders into the strike, putting real weight behind it. Bruce slipped to the outside. Miss. A hook followed immediately, heavy and violent, the kind meant to end exchanges early. Bruce stepped inside the arc of the punch. Miss. The sequence was clean. Textbook. Deadly in any tournament ring. But Bruce Lee moved like he wasn't playing the same game. Chuck reset his feet and came again. Jab. Cross. Hook. Each punch faster than the last. Bruce didn't retreat. He didn't raise his guard. He leaned. He slipped. He shifted his weight with such precision it looked effortless. Punch after punch cut through empty air. The sound filled the room. That sharp whoosh fighters recognize instantly. Chuck's breathing deepened. His eyes narrowed. Most opponents would have been overwhelmed by now. Most would have covered up or backed away. Bruce Lee did neither. He stayed just close enough to be dangerous. That was the unsettling part. Chuck fired another combination, adding an uppercut this time, snapping it upward with speed and power. Bruce rolled his shoulders and let it pass beneath his chin. Miss. The room reacted now. Quiet gasps, murmurs, disbelief. No one had seen Chuck Norris miss like this. Not repeatedly. Not cleanly. Chuck increased the pace. Punches came faster. More aggressive. He stopped measuring. Stopped setting traps. He wanted to land. His footwork grew heavier as he pressed forward, trying to cut off angles, trying to force Bruce into a corner that wasn't there. Bruce Lee moved like water. He didn't step back in straight lines. He slid diagonally. Shifted sideways. Turned just enough. Each movement erased the punch before it could arrive. Chuck threw a flurry now, relentless, continuous. Left, right, left, right. The sound of fists slicing air echoed off the walls. Still nothing landed. Chuck's jaw tightened. He added power. Shoulders tightened. Punches came harder. Each strike carried frustration now, the subtle tension of a man whose certainty was beginning to crack. Bruce remained untouched. His breathing was steady. His posture relaxed. He wasn't guessing. He was reading. Reading shoulder movement. Hip rotation. Weight transfer. Bruce Lee wasn't dodging punches. He was arriving early to where the punches wouldn't be. The count climbed. 10 strikes. 20. 30. Every single one missed. Chuck circled, then lunged forward again, throwing a wide hook, hoping to catch Bruce on the exit. Bruce stepped inside the punch once more, close enough that Chuck could feel him there, but still unreachable. That proximity was unnerving. Chuck threw again. Miss. Again. Miss. Sweat formed on Chuck's brow. Not from exhaustion, but confusion. He had faced fast fighters before. He had faced elusive ones. But this was different. Bruce Lee wasn't running. He wasn't defending. He was controlling the space without touching it. Chuck unleashed everything now. A rapid sequence of strikes, fast, hard, desperate. 47 punches cut through the air in total. 47 attempts. And not one found its target. When Chuck finally stopped, the room was silent. No cheering. No commentary. Just the sound of his breath. And the undeniable truth hanging in the air. Bruce Lee stood directly in front of him. Calm. Untouched. Unmoved. That was the moment everyone understood. This wasn't about strength. It wasn't about speed. It was about mastery. And Bruce Lee was operating on a level few had ever witnessed. Chuck finally stepped back. Not because he was told to. Not because he was finished. But because his body needed a moment to catch up with what his mind couldn't understand. His chest rose and fell heavily. Breathing sharp. Uneven. Confusion replaced confidence on his face. He wiped sweat from his brow and stared at Bruce Lee as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "How?" Chuck said, shaking his head slightly. "How are you not there?" It wasn't anger in his voice. It wasn't frustration. It was disbelief. Bruce didn't answer right away. He took a single step forward. The room tensed instantly. Up until now, Bruce hadn't attacked. He hadn't threatened. He hadn't even looked aggressive. But this step was different. It was deliberate. In one sudden, fluid motion, faster than most eyes could fully track, Bruce Lee moved. His body shifted. His hips snapped. His arm extended. A fist stopped 1 inch from Chuck Norris's face. Not touching. Not grazing. Just there. Perfectly still. The room froze. You could hear breathing again, not just Chuck's, but everyone's. Bruce held the position calmly, his fist suspended in the air like it had been placed there intentionally. Chuck didn't flinch. But his eyes widened. Because in that instant, he understood something deeply unsettling. Bruce hadn't been avoiding punches because he had to. He'd been avoiding them because he chose to. "I could have hit you," Bruce said softly. His voice wasn't proud. It wasn't sharp. It was almost gentle. "But proving control," Bruce continued, slowly lowering his fist, "matters more than proving strength." The words settled over the room like weight. This wasn't humiliation. This wasn't dominance. It was clarity. Chuck exhaled deeply and lowered his hands. For the first time since stepping onto the mat, he wasn't thinking about winning. He was thinking about learning. "I was throwing everything I had," Chuck admitted quietly. "And you weren't even fighting." Bruce nodded. "Fighting is the last option," he replied. "Understanding comes first." That sentence hit harder than any punch could have. Because Chuck realized something uncomfortable, something most fighters never do. Bruce Lee wasn't reacting to attacks. He was reading intent before motion. He wasn't faster because of muscle. He was faster because of awareness. The room remained silent. Not awkwardly. Reverently. Everyone present knew they had just witnessed something rare, not a victory, but a revelation. Chuck straightened his posture and extended his hand. Bruce took it. No cheers followed. No applause. Just respect. Backhand index pointing down comment, respect, if skill beats ego every time. Bell subscribe if you want more untold martial arts legends. Because moments like this don't happen often. And when they do, they redefine what true mastery really looks like. The room was silent. Not the kind of silence that follows shock or embarrassment, but the kind that settles after truth reveals itself. No cheers broke out. No one clapped. No one felt the need to speak. What had just happened didn't require commentary. Chuck Norris slowly lowered his hands. The tension in his shoulders eased. The bounce in his stance disappeared. He wasn't defeated, but something inside him had shifted. "I see it now," Chuck said quietly. His voice carried across the room, steady and sincere. "I was fighting muscles," he continued. "You were fighting minds." Bruce Lee nodded, acknowledging the words without pride or celebration. That moment marked a turning point. Not just for Chuck, but for everyone watching. Because in martial arts, acknowledging another's mastery takes more courage than throwing punches. Chuck took a few steps back, rolling his wrists, replaying the exchange in his head. "I've trained for power," he admitted. "Speed. Endurance. Pressure." Bruce listened. "But you weren't there," Chuck went on. "You were never where I aimed." Bruce finally spoke. "Because you were looking for targets," he said. "I was looking for intention." That distinction changed everything. The fighters in the room exchanged glances. Some nodded slowly, understanding dawning on their faces. This wasn't a lesson about styles. It wasn't karate versus kung fu. It was about perception. Chuck Norris had built his career on discipline and strength. and it had taken him far. But Bruce Lee had taken those foundations and asked a different question. Why wait for the punch to exist? Bruce explained quietly, without lecturing. Every movement begins before the body moves, he said. In the eyes. In the breath. In the mind. Chuck listened like a student. Not arguing. Not defending his pride. Absorbing. From that day forward, something changed. Chuck Norris never mocked Bruce Lee again. He never dismissed his ideas. Never questioned his calm. Instead, he sought him out. Training sessions followed. Not flashy. Not publicized. Just hours on the mat. Bruce would demonstrate angles. Foot placement. Timing. Chuck would test them, again and again. Sometimes he'd laugh in disbelief when something worked. Other times he'd stop mid-movement, realizing why it didn't. They weren't rivals anymore. They were collaborators. Bruce challenged Chuck's assumptions. Chuck challenged Bruce's limits. Each grew sharper, stronger, smarter, and the respect between them deepened with every session. People who saw them train together later would say the same thing. They didn't try to outdo each other. They tried to understand each other. That's rare among legends, because greatness often resists humility. But Chuck embraced it. Years later, when asked about Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris would never speak of winning or losing. He would speak of learning, of perspective, of how one quiet moment on a mat reshaped how he understood combat and himself. The room that day eventually returned to noise. Conversations resumed. Footsteps echoed again. But nothing was the same. Because those who had witnessed it knew. They had just seen a master recognize another master. And in martial arts, that recognition is the highest victory of all. Bruce Lee didn't win by punching. He won by not needing to. That's the part most people miss. There was no knockout. No dramatic fall. No final blow that ended the moment. And yet, everyone in that room knew exactly who had demonstrated true mastery. Because real power doesn't rush to prove itself. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand validation. True mastery waits. It understands. It chooses control over chaos. Bruce Lee didn't dominate Chuck Norris physically. He revealed something deeper. That strength without awareness is incomplete. That speed without timing is wasted. That power without control is just noise. Most people think fighting is about aggression. Bruce showed it's about clarity. He didn't chase victory. He didn't chase ego. He simply stood where danger couldn't reach him. That's why the lesson mattered. Because it applies far beyond martial arts. In life, the loudest voice in the room is rarely the strongest. The most aggressive person is rarely the most capable. Ego makes noise. Skill stays silent. People driven by ego need to prove themselves constantly. They measure worth by dominance, by winning, by being seen. But people driven by mastery, they don't need to announce it. They let their actions, or sometimes their restraint, speak for them. Bruce Lee understood something few ever do. You don't have to take every fight. You don't have to answer every challenge. You don't have to land every blow to prove who you are. Sometimes, the greatest statement is control. Chuck Norris understood that lesson too. And that's why this story isn't about humiliation. It's about growth. It's about what happens when a strong man is willing to admit there's another level, and chooses to learn instead of defend his pride. That's why both men remain legends. One for his power and discipline. The other for his philosophy and precision. Different paths. Same destination. Respect. And maybe that's the real message here. Respect isn't about fear. It isn't about titles or trophies. It's about recognizing mastery, especially when it comes quietly. Because one day, the person you underestimate might be the one teaching you everything you thought you already knew. Red Heart, like this video if you believe humility is real strength. Speech balloon comment below. Who do you respect more, Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris? Bell subscribe for more stories where legends are made, not claimed. Until next time, stay sharp, stay humble, and remember, the strongest move is sometimes the one you never have to throw.